Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Frank and Stan chat. And this is a spotlight edition where we have, as in this case, a single guest with us, and we chat about a single subject or a couple of issues around a particular subject. And I'm delighted to say that we have Rebecca Hanson with us this morning. Hello, Rebecca.
Hi,
There we
nice to
are.
meet you. Hi, Stan.
Yeah, and those of you watching on video, because this goes out as a video and as a podcast, but if you're on the video, you'll see that Stan is not in his usual study. He's in Benlek in Anglesey. That's correct, isn't
Yeah,
it, Stan?
that's absolutely beautiful day. Last day of the holidays for me, so I'm going to make the most of it if I
Yeah.
can.
Now he looks over, you're high up on a hill,
Yeah,
overlooking a beach, overlooking the sea.
yeah. The sun. I tried to make it so we were looking that way, but the sun is so bright this morning. It just meant I was silhouetted against the white background.
Well, anyway, so we always have issues with Stan and the signal in Benlek. And actually, whenever we do these chats, it always highlights the problems that there are in actually, creating a business that's actually got a very poor broadband signal. And everything you've done, Stan, hasn't it, has been trying to improve that broadband
Yeah,
signal. But how people manage that, I don't know. But
I'm
anyway,
even next to my TP link, so,
all
so I
right.
can't really close to it.
Right, Rebecca, do you want to just tell us who you are, where you live, what you've done, and so we've got a decent understanding about your sort of background.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. My specialism is in schools that face the most challenges with maths education. I am a maths teacher. I have done all sorts of interesting things in my time, but today's focus is on maths education, secondary maths education in the schools with the negative progress 8 scores. I went to one of the worst schools in the country myself. I was head of maths in a school that faced extreme challenges, declining numbers, and taking in all the schools who are on the verge of all the kids who are on the verge of exclusion from other
Mm.
schools, that kind of thing until it closed in 2008. And these
Whereabouts was
days,
that? Don't tell me the name of it, but whereabouts in the country was it?
that's in West Cumbria.
West Cumbria.
And I'm now on supply in the Liverpool area, secondary teaching. And since September, I have taught maths in 8 schools with negative progress 8 scores.
Right. Well, gosh. So, Stan, we know West Cumbria quite well, but we knew it very well in the
Yeah,
mid 90s when we inspected so many schools in West Cumbria for Ofsted. But anyway.
Mm.
only small primary schools.
Yeah, only small primary schools. So,
Well, I can tell you stories about small primary schools, but that's not for
yeah,
today.
that's for another day.
Yeah.
Okay, so Rebecca, I mean, in a way, how did we connect? Do you want to tell people how we connected?
Was it through LinkedIn?
It was, yeah.
Frank, I noticed your posts about Ofsted and was particularly impressed by the sensitivity of them and the knowledge and the quality.
Can we record that, Stan? Stan, you should be laughing.
Yeah, I'm just beginning to wonder if this has been a paid bribe, except for it's you, Frank, so I knew it wouldn't be paid.
No, but I would say Rebecca and I have never met. We have spoken we've never met face to face, and I think I was struck by some of the comments that Rebecca was making to me on LinkedIn. But
I'm
we
a
did have
bit
a
different. People use LinkedIn in a particular way to
yeah,
show off what they're doing professionally and to create an image of their own success.
yes.
I just use it as social media and say whatever I want, which is
So
quite noticeable in
now I have to
different
say,
styles.
neither Stan nor I are maths teachers. We were primary head teachers, but actually I have got obviously we had children through the system. I've got grandchildren going through the secondary system at the moment, so I have a particular viewpoint on perhaps some of the things you're saying as well. So do you want to
I
sort of
should
just
say at that point, I was very good at maths from a very early age. I had a reception teacher that we're talking in the 50s now, who had Cuisenaire, which is like, I don't know if you know Cuisenaire, but it's like
Yes.
Dean's apparatus. And we were using that aged 4 to build up number concepts and everything. So by the time I'd left reception, I could multiply, divide, add, and subtract fractions.
wow, what
That's
happened
good.
after that, Stan?
That's how I spent my time in church, sitting there asking my parents, what's a third of a quarter of 120?
Wow,
And
blimey.
they'd be going,
Well,
"What?"
this discussion today isn't about
No.
the students
Anyways,
who had your level of advantage. That's all been wiped out by mastery, where everyone has to learn the same stuff at the same time in
yeah, well,
primary.
yes. I mean, your experiences then, Rebecca, both in West Cumbria, but now in Liverpool. What sort of where do you think we are with regard to secondary maths teaching at the moment?
Well, I'll touch on what's going on in the schools with average intakes and the schools with higher intake. But at the minute, you've got on average about 27% of children coming through to secondary school who have not met the expected standard in Key Stage 2 SATs. And that means they've only done about half of Key Stage 2 or less. And for quite a few of them, it's a lot less. Now, these children are concentrated in the schools in the areas of socio-economic disadvantage. And you can get up to maybe 80% of children who are in that category coming through into these schools. And the challenges they face are very different to the schools where it's maybe 10%,
Mm,
and the children who are at that level or maybe just above that level are likely to have tutors, private tutors. And then the numbers you're left with who are struggling that much, you can run an extra class for them. And in the culture of a good school, a school with less socioeconomic disadvantage, the children will probably attend that class. And then you've got a small proportion of students who are not succeeding at maths but are struggling with so many issues. Nobody expects them to because that's not a priority at the minute. So that really works. The children are thriving in a school like that.
mm,
What's happening is wonderful. Everyone's very happy. I've taught in schools like that. But what's happening in the schools where you're taking in above 50% of students who have not met the expected standard at Key Stage 2 is very different. And I don't hear anyone else talking about it. People who teach in those schools are rarely confident themselves or respected. So they just don't have a voice. It's not discussed. Nobody knows what's going on. So I speak out as loudly as I possibly can. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to
no,
do it today.
no. I mean, in a way, the issues aren't just around mathematics either, are they? I suspect that there's a deficiency in performance as well in some other areas as well, which have a knock-on effect on mathematics. It's not
Well, I
just
would say it's much more the other way, Frank.
right.
These children have been failing for years
Mm,
already at maths. And when they get to secondary school, they don't have a hope because we have the 2014 maths curriculum, which prescribes what they're going to study at it all the time. And they are being forced to fail every day for an hour every day on an epic scale because they've been failing for so long. And that certainly has a knock-on effect to other subjects. And yes, there may be an incoming force from other issues in the school, but when you see the issues in maths, and of course, as a supply teacher, I may teach 3 or 4 lessons of maths a day, but my free lessons are filled with other subjects, so I see the contrast. In other subjects, you change topic. You have videos and stories to tell, and that's just not the case in maths. This is all stuff that's cumulative on what's gone before, and
right.
what's gone before is horrendous failure.
So what do you put that failure down to?
Well, it wasn't like that. Oh, sorry. The failure comes from disrupted education. There's a few forces for it. One is disruption from home. Another is disruption from lack of teachers or interrupted teaching at primary school. And a third one that's very obvious is the compromise of the early years stage, which is in a mess.
Mm. So you
So a
mentioned
lot of these children have had very difficult issues at home, and it just takes out a year of your teaching. You're not focused on it. You're
mm,
focused elsewhere, and then by the time you're ready to focus again, the curriculum has moved on and you're lost.
it's funny you mentioned 2014. But
Yeah.
what I know but I know why you mentioned 2014. But for those who are listening or watching, why did you raise 2014 as an important year?
Well, I need to talk a little bit about what it was like before my school closed in 2008.
Right.
So as a head of maths and a maths teacher, I had choice regarding what to teach my students under the old Key Stage 3 curriculum. And I would have classes of students who were like that. They had missed 2 or 3 years of maths. They were terrified of maths. They were just emotionally a mess, and much worse when they came into maths lessons. And my requirement was to settle those students and to help them have an experience in the maths classroom that calmed them down, made them feel like they belonged, made them feel like they were making progress. And the kind of strategies we'd use would be to do some maths that revised primary maths, but in a more mature context. So the questions would look different and more relevant to them. But we'd be revising that maths and building their confidence and settling them in. And then maybe giving them some work that was targeted at exactly their needs. And then letting them be free to do anything they wanted that was sensible. We'd get to know these kids, and that would be as much as they could do given the stress they were under. And it gave me as a teacher space to work one-to-one with kids who needed it, to calm them down and to get them back on a sensible track, a meaningful track for them. And gradually, as you settled classes, you could do more with them and stretch them more, and they were ready for that and they enjoyed that, but not when you first got them. Especially if you weren't picking them up from a teacher where they were really settled. And that completely changed with the 2014 Key Stage 3 curriculum. But it had also changed as a consequence of Ofsted.
Yeah, because for me, I think we underestimate if you go from a non-specialist mathematician teaching you, although I have to say in many secondary schools, they're not specialists anymore, are they? Maths teachers. They're converted maths teachers. But there is something around the language that's used, which actually around, children in primary schools taught by non-specialists, they learn a mechanism. They don't learn the language of mathematics in quite the same way. And I've noticed that when they progress to secondary, they find it very challenging because the teacher's not actually using the same language or explaining it in the same way that they used to. And I think that for some who have a sort of fairly sort of light understanding of mathematics, that can tip them over into feeling as though they can't do it.
Yeah. To expand that out, that was the absolute commitment of Nick Gibb, that children should learn maths results by rote rather than by understanding. And the classic example of that was the multiplication tables check. It was supported pretty much universally, but the assumption was that it would support children taking a journey through understanding, gradually building towards fluency, and then recognizing the benefit of instant recall. And various structures were suggested and being developed that supported that journey. And Nick Gibb came in and derived his own test, which was in year 4, which is extremely young, which drove rote relearning because there wasn't time to take that journey towards the structure of exam that he imposed, which was the 6-second response for every single
I really do think we need to explain that a little bit more because there are some people here who are not aware of what happens in year 4, and that assessment, which it's a test, it's a timed test where every child sits down in front of a screen and they're given 6 seconds to get an answer in terms of what a multiplication problem is, and actually this. On a personal level, I know the stress that some young children experience when they're doing that. Even children that are able to do it quickly And I know of one child in particular who got one wrong on that assessment and actually felt as though they'd failed because they got the one wrong. You know.
Well, Nick Gibbs' initial version of this test was that you were a failure if you didn't get 100%. That was his determination, and that was argued. So that definition wasn't explicitly used. But the consequences of this test are the way it's done. Children forget those results and they don't understand how to reconstruct them. And that's not true of your most advantaged kids and your most able kids, because they have gone through that journey of understanding and fluency to get there. But a lot of your children, especially those who haven't had the support at home that some have, it is ramming those facts into their head without understanding and taking all that time, which could have been used for a sensible journey through maths, albeit too young, and our curriculum is too young. That time is taken away and spent on rote learning instead.
So let's move it forward then to Key Stage 2, SATs.
All right.
Assessment. Because obviously that, some children, for whatever reason, didn't do particularly well in the Year 4 assessment, or did really well, then come up against the Key Stage 2 SATs. And the thing that Stan and I get really frustrated at is the amount of time that's taken out of the Year 6 curriculum in order to get drilled into children so they achieve well as they can in those SATs, and that's at the expense of all the other experiences that they will have. And it's not just in Year 6, it's in Year 5 as well. So in effect, it's the negative impact of what an enjoyable experience primary school could be compared to what it has become. And in a way that lever started to be cranked up in Year 4 as far as I'm concerned. So what's your view then in the Key Stage 2 SATs, and how does that prepare them? Because we've got to get us on to the Key Stage 3. How does that prepare them or not for the Key Stage 3 experience?
Well, as I said before, about 27% of children are not achieving the expected threshold and in those Key Stage 2 SATs. Now, those students have been failing to understand maths on a very substantial scale throughout Key Stage 2 and usually before that as well. Now they're failing in a much more known and supported environment. They know their teachers very well. Their teachers know them. They know how to care for them and work around those issues that they're facing. With the same teachers, they will probably be having a lot of fun in other subjects. So their negative experience in maths as a whole child is supported by other subjects and the environment that they're in.
Right.
But that support falls away when they get to secondary school.
Right.
It's a bad experience in maths, but it's usually not a bad experience of school and of life.
Right. So children then go to Key Stage 3.
Yeah.
And it feels as though even those children that struggled to get to the expected standard in primary, there's still a tail off, isn't there? There's still something, even for children that apparently have done reasonably well. Not all of them progress in that sort of linear way forward. Even for those that did all right, there's still a drop off. So, I mean, why is that? What is it then within the maths curriculum that's impacting negatively on kids who did enjoy mathematics at primary school, but particularly for those who didn't?
I think you've asked me about both ends.
Well, yeah, because
I can answer that in one way, really. And that is that in your top sets in the schools facing the most challenges, you have got those students who excelled at Key Stage 2 SATs, who in other schools would be targeting grades 8 and 9. But you've got such a huge, if you've got 80% of children not having achieved the expected threshold, and you've got 4 sets, that means you've got children in that bottom category who are in the same sets as your most able students. And the Key Stage 3 curriculum it continues from the primary curriculum. So those children at the bottom end can't access it. And the children at the top end, the teacher can't create extension work for them because the teacher is going through hell. They are trying to teach that curriculum and it is working for the middle of the set, or it could work if there was a sane classroom environment. But you've got those children who can't cope with it, who are very stressed, who are starting to be out of maths classes more and more with urgent toilet passes, with feeling sick, with needing counselling, with truanting, with just not being there. They're somewhere else in school. Or they're kicking off with behaviour in order to put a protective shield around them so they're not experiencing that failure every lesson. And your students at the top end are bored. They see that going on. They don't want to look bright in that environment. And they're the ones you see ending up joining in that poor behaviour. And that's what the teacher's trying to do is pretty impossible. The teachers, there's often inconsistent teaching, non-specialist teaching in there. You've got teacher absence because teachers can't cope. Teachers leaving at an epic rate. If you've got a teacher off, any teachers remaining in the school are moved on to year 11 and possibly year 10 because they're the ones that the school is focusing on most. So the void in Key Stage 3 becomes even more obvious. There's absolute hell in there. It's horrendous.
Right.
There must also be a group of children, excuse me, a group of children who are drilled to get the SATs. So they do get the expected, but their understanding of maths in a wider sense is nowhere near where it could be. I'm thinking now of when I was working with a secondary school who said, yeah, these kids come with great SAT results, but we virtually have to start again because the support mechanisms that they've had in the primary school, they've been scaffolded to get to this level. Their basic understanding is missing, and they have to almost start again.
Yeah, that's in a more advantaged area. A lot of those children have tutors now, private tutors. One of the things I'd like to explain about the stats is that if you've got 27% of students who did not achieve the expected threshold at Key Stage 2 SATs, the percentage of children who are not going to achieve a grade 4 is greater than that. I think it's about 29% or so.
Yeah.
So the correlation there is if it was an even environment, you would generally not expect those students to get grade 4s at GCSE. But it's not an even environment. If those children go to a school in a socio-economic advantaged area, as I said before, there's that extra focus on them, there's extra support, they're likely to have tutors, their needs are understood. So it is likely that those children will come through that barrier and get that grade 4 at GCSE, which makes it less likely that there's any chance that the students going into the tougher schools will have a chance of getting a grade 4.
Does it feel though that, I mean, I'm just sort of trying to, I feel a bit like a BBC journalist now, trying to sort of put the opposite view, but actually, is the system designed, it feels like it's not designed to be equitable, right? It feels as though...
Oh my,
yeah,
to say that, Frank, is such a vast understatement.
Yeah.
The only way it was designed to be equitable over the last 15 years, or even longer than that, to be honest, was this belief that if you label people as being failures more and more and more often, every day on a regular basis, then you would get progress.
Yes.
And it works in the schools with advantage because the kids get private tutors, which is a wonderful experience for them. But in a school where there's no culture of doing homework, the parents didn't succeed, and oh gosh.
But actually the system, with it not being equitable, the system is actually designed to produce the failures.
Oh yeah.
We've spoken about this with Dennis Sherwood before about, I think there's a belief amongst the general public that no matter if everybody worked really hard, everybody and would actually pass their maths GCSE. That is, you talk to people, they can't understand that the system is designed not to allow that to happen, and there's a lot of weight put on the fact that that's a rigorous sort of approach. But the issue here is, for me, is what the biggest problem with our country moving forward is the fact that we have this sort of underbelly, this sort of group of young people who are coming out of education who are disaffected by it, who haven't enjoyed that experience. They're not well set up for success in life. And that's all, a lot of that is just put down to the fact, well, you're not very good at maths or you're not very good at English or whatever it may be. So
And they see themselves that way as
they
well.
do, and in a way that and it's not all about economy. It's about what satisfaction you have in life. What is
Yes.
life about? It's about
Yeah.
self-worth, isn't it? And feeling as though everybody's got something to contribute. But
And
actually,
absolutely, and the way we used to teach was about giving those students back a sense of self-worth and taking them on a journey with maths, which understood that they had gaps, but helped them to understand that that was not their fault, and give them that experience of making progress from where they were. So it was different. Our focus was on addressing the issues you've just raised.
yeah, because actually the economy requires, with Son and I have spoken about, well,
Yeah.
Brexit, we're talking about now tariffs, the challenge, whatever it may be. But actually, if there is a sense of self-worth, I think there is a bit about being able to contribute something to society yourself and being an integral part of it. But actually, if we're actually designing a system which actually means that we're creating an underclass, a group of young people who cannot achieve that standard, they are necessary for our future growth and development of our country.
Absolutely.
And so, in a
And
way, well, how
our
can we have this
international
system?
tests, Frank, our international tests show this disparity, show that those with economic advantage and
Yes,
socioeconomic disadvantage are miles apart. But the situation is much, much worse than those international statistics show, because the bottom end of our students are missing
yes,
on a huge scale. If you look at the figures, the kids who are just out of school, all sorts of things going on. You see another headline about a group of students who are missing. But if you go into schools and teach, it's much worse than that. You get this register for not even a bottom set with 20 kids on, and when you're given cover, someone gives you 4 worksheets.
yes.
How will
So,
I cope? And they say, well, no more than 2 will turn up. And they're
yeah,
all on the register, but they're just elsewhere.
right.
And you get the concealment of students who are actually absent for school attendance figures. And then the nature of sampling in the international tests. You get things going on with
Yeah,
TIMS and so on, that if they select 2 classes from a school and less than 85% of the students attend, that
but
school is wiped out.
yes,
But
Right.
so it's not just the students who are missing, it's the whole schools of the and
yeah, and also
so the understanding of socioeconomic disadvantage and the spread is vastly understated, and our national achievement is overstated for
yes,
those
yeah,
reasons.
yeah. But I think that, and also it's interesting, that there's a lot of emphasis placed on our standing in those, whether it's, whichever one it is, whichever international comparison you're using, and actually there's a lot of play. Oh, we've moved from sort of 12th to 9th or something, but statistically, there's insignificant. There is just no difference. It's a statistical sort of.
Whereas the statistics I've just described as to how our results are overstated are significant.
Yeah, they are. And also the thing that the government's very keen not to stress is the corresponding sort of international studies about how young people feel about themselves, and
Yeah.
about where do we sit on a well-being scale? Where do we sit
There's a
about
lot of work
satisfaction
going.
with school? These are things that are quite convenient to drop off the agenda, because actually we've gone from 12th to 9th in a league table. on a very selective group of kids that are being tested, you know.
Or as I heard the other day, the best readers in the Western world.
Well,
What's
Yeah,
that
so
supposed to mean?
there's work going on in Parliament discussing this issue of disengagement and what the consequences of our education are for students. And I mean, I don't know how much you're aware, but in 2011, I was so horrified by what was going on in education policy and what the consequences would be, and particularly with Ofsted, that I gave up my plans to do a PhD, junked them in, and went into politics and started screaming very loudly and happy on these issues ever since. So I became a Lib Dem in order to do that, and the Lib Dems are working very hard on this bill. The amendments to it have been rejected, but there's stuff going on in the House of Lords. So it looks like this work on student mental health and so on is not going to go through effectively. I mean, hopefully that will be sorted out, but our spokesperson on education, Munira, is working hard on it. But
yeah.
But again, what even the support with mental health, that, you know, from my experience, the schools in advantaged areas have far more support for mental health than the schools in really difficult circumstances, because
well, one of the key reasons for that is our early years play stage. It was an obsession with Nick Gibbon crushing it, and he dumped the Rose curriculum, which was due to be introduced in 2010, which addressed some of those issues. He personally decided to crush the early years stage. Now, students who have socioeconomic advantage generally get that play stage anyway. For those who haven't had those opportunities, that play stage, you know, it's not enough. It's not comparable internationally by some way. Other countries look at us and just go, what is going on here? But obviously Nick Gibb introduced examinations on column addition and subtraction without apparatus for 6-year-olds. So we talk about when you first introduce column addition and subtraction on an international forum, and they discuss whether it's a 7 or 8, but it's always with apparatus. And we were examining 6-year-olds on it without apparatus at the fetish of a minister. So the mental health, that early years stage, is so important.
Absolutely.
And social skills.
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate. I went to a primary school in China, in the country, not in the city, and I was really shocked at the barrenness of that experience for those children. You know, there was continual, even for the youngest kids, there were page after page after page of the approved maths textbook, hundreds and hundreds of pages, with no explanation whatsoever, as if to say, if you do enough of these 100 pages, you will get to the 200th page. It doesn't mean that you understand the mathematics.
Is this for 5-year-olds?
Yeah, this is for 7-year-olds, but it was true. We saw the younger children as well. It just ramps up, and that is. But it was the barrenness of it. That, I mean, I said to one of the children, I said, "Well, do you ever do shape?" And the child said, "Yeah, it's on page 162 and 163." The rest of it is all number. It's literally number. You know, and actually, when you think about, you know, if anybody thinks that that's going to give you an understanding of the mathematical skills you're going to require for the rest of your life, then you have no understanding about how you're using mathematics in your daily life.
Well, we had the Shanghai project. This much, gosh, what did they say about how fabulous it was? And it was awful. Absolutely awful. We had, I remember watching a lesson from a teacher from Shanghai who was teaching 6-year-olds, and she was teaching them stuff that they'd done a year or two earlier. And she had 110 slides that ran over the lesson. They were surrounded by all these people in suits in a hall where they were having this lesson. And of course, they were all flying because they'd done it all before.
Already. Yeah.
And that was given the credit to the Shanghai teacher, who then rushed off to do some shopping and sightseeing.
Before we finish, just in a way, you talked about politics. If you had the political power to make change in the teaching of mathematics at Key Stage 3, what would you do?
Well, I published a report which is on my website, which is Authentic Maths, if anyone wants to see it about
We'll
what's
put a
going
link at
on.
the end of this to that.
Okay, thank you. Um, One was that was dealing with the top end and the bottom end at Key Stage 3. So there's children who've exceeded the expected threshold and those who have not met it. So at the top end, you need sets for those students and for those who are capable of attaining that standard, even if that means having a lopsided year. So if you split into two groups of 4 sets, having that set on one side, those students need that. In those schools, the students aren't going through to get the kind of results that will allow them to be maths teachers
Mm,
or whatever. And if we're short of maths teachers who can go into those schools and cope, we need to we need to have a route by which they can succeed. We need a curriculum that can work for the children who are struggling. We don't have one. Um, the one of the things I've focused on is that the Progress 8 score system only allows for attainment at GCSE.
yeah.
And the right journey for some of these students is through functional skills, which does what I've suggested matters before, puts the maths into context. You can start at a very basic level and take a really meaningful journey through those functional skills qualifications. And the other problem you've got is that a lot of these students cannot cope and are off the rails because they don't get breaks and they can't run around and there's no clubs. They get 10 to 15 minutes at break time
Yes.
to get some food and run to the loo. They then only get half an hour at lunchtime, which is long enough to get some food.
Yeah.
And that's it. Those clubs don't exist. So for students who are struggling at maths, and are clearly off the rails of behavior because they can't exercise, I've suggested as my fourth recommendation that you create a curriculum that involves more physical activity for them. So if they do their homework and work hard in their maths lessons, they get an extra lesson of PE or
Mm,
something, a sport that really physically challenges them. You
mm,
got them coming in and just fighting, play fighting,
yeah.
and it's because they need physical activity.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, we that will what you've just said there about physical activity. We've had a couple of guests on here who've written a book about that. They've been on a couple of times, haven't
yeah.
we, Stan?
Yeah, but move to learn was it? 'Cause
Move to learn, yeah, and but that doesn't involve, it doesn't involve too much adaptation for individual teachers, but it's at the heart of it. It is just, children just need time to have fun and to run around and just meet people, and this sort of stuff, which I don't think people realize is not available now in many secondary schools because of the tightness of the curriculum, but also the tightness of the day. Everything's so regulated. But anyway, what a fascinating chat.
Frank, I know you're not allowed to ask me about Ofsted because you've been
Oh no,
banned.
we were going to. Well, Stan hasn't got his buzzer, but
no,
go on
it's
then. We'll
it's
give
not
you
bad.
2 minutes on it.
We ended up going down a rabbit hole where Ofsted was the subject every week.
I know, so
So
we
we
decided
tried to
not
put
to.
that
So, but no,
up
I
this
don't.
week.
I talked
I will
about
say nothing now. It's
we've
up
only
to
got
you.
2 minutes.
Yeah,
So
go
I
on.
talked about how it was as a head of maths. That was obliterated by Ofsted. That was obliterated by inspectors coming into schools like mine having no clue, absolutely no clue, and
Right.
feeling they had to change things. So in the school I was at, I mean, you were graded as a teacher.
Mm.
They had no clue how to grade teachers who didn't fit those grammar school criteria. And they negatively graded one of my maths teachers who had a breakdown and went off and never came back. I got a satisfactory because they couldn't fit me to any other criteria. And the consequences were horrific. They got rid of the head teacher. Violence went through the roof all of a sudden because it had not been an issue and the executive head teacher had none of the relevant skills. So you had a student who threw a chisel at the head of a teacher that only just missed. And it's just really relevant, the series Adolescence that everyone's watching at the minute, the third episode, the way the young man treats his clinical psychologist. people are like, oh, that's all new. That's with the internet. It's like, no, it isn't. That's what I was experiencing at school myself and in this department. And the way that he behaved towards the clinical psychologist, this student who had chucked the chisel and not had any consequences, walked into my walk-in cupboard and did that to me.
Mm.
And nothing was done. He did it a week later. And my union ordered me off. But then, of course, everyone has to have someone to blame. Ofsted were to blame, but there was no way of doing that.
Yes.
So we were blamed, and nobody wanted me back because that made it possible to blame me. And it was sick, it was horrific. And that's why I got into politics when the satisfactory grading was abolished in 2012. And I was just looking at the Regulatory Reform Act 2006.21, if you're not aware of that one, and looking
Not
how
aware of that at all.
it should be, Frank. Read it, because I live in a community of people who work in regulation and how it works across the country. And the contrast between Ofsted and the reality of what regulation should be is just horrific. And that point sums it up.
Right.
Having got rid of teacher grading, that was the end of my commitment to what I needed to do with Ofsted then, and I've moved on to other things.
The thing is, for me, I can have my little Ofsted rant now. If what is shocking is that if in a way, adolescence, that the series is, in a way, the fact that it's captured or given an insight into stuff that, as you say, Rebecca, it's not new. It's as if it's, oh, is this what's going on? Actually, if Ofsted was worth having, it would actually report on what actually is going on in schools. But it doesn't. It doesn't report
because
on
the people involved don't understand those schools.
Yeah.
And they just destroy them.
Yeah.
Because they impose grammar school expectations onto schools that are doing an amazing job with students like that, calming them down, giving them a sense of self-worth. I mean, it's all gone. The skill set is gone. The teachers were wiped out. And then the Key Stage 3 curriculum compounded that just when we got rid of teacher grading. Those skill sets this young man, if he had had a really good school experience, a really good experience, it's very likely that his life would have taken a different journey because he would have had a positive self-image, which he didn't have.
No. I think, I mean, it's...
Well, surely we can just take all the teachers from these really good schools and put them into the disadvantaged school.
Tried that.
I'll solve it all.
It's a whole different skill set to be good.
I know. I know.
No, we know.
I don't believe it.
I know you know that
whatsoever.
What's in my head is we have a guest on here. I don't even want to mention that guest's name, but we have a guest here who basically was a senior manager in one of the most challenging schools in one of the most challenging estates in the country. Who actually has put 15-20 years of his life into this community, and a new trust has taken it on, and he's out.
Yeah, this is what happened with the head of high school.
Hang on a minute, hang on. This is, you think you can actually draw out that 20 years. Why did he stay there 20 years? It wasn't because he was incompetent. He stayed there because he felt as though he could contribute, help. But actually what happens is there's a new broom. And
it's not about what people do. It's about in these schools, it's about the relationships.
Yes, it is.
The whole dynamics between all the staff and that stability and the knowledge. These kids, they need to be known. They need somebody to understand them. And as maths teachers and English teachers, we were crucial because we saw them 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And we were the ones who could build that relationship with them where we just know them and their needs and their capabilities and what worked for them and what didn't. And if we struggled with them, we would lever across their relationship with another teacher to strengthen their relationship with us. And that whole school community dynamic was essential. And it is about that stability in staff rather than how well a teacher can teach in a different circumstance. They're not going to have that knowledge of the community within the school.
Well, I'd like to give a shout out then to every single maths teacher who's been working in the most challenging communities and has stuck at it.
Yeah, well,
Well done.
I've been in year groups in schools where the whole staff room is saying that they will not continue past the
Mm.
summer no matter
Yeah,
what.
I know. Um,
Yeah.
okay. Well, thank you for your time, Rebecca.
And thank you.
If
Thank
you
you
want,
both. Really
there's a
appreciate it.
link. Do you want to, because on the podcast it's difficult to get the link up. Do you want to just let us know where that authentic maths, where they can find it if people want to have a look for it?
It's just
All right.
authenticmaths.com, which is my website. And it's a recent, did I do it in February? Each post is dated. And if you click on it, you do have to click on see more of it, and then you'll see the report to download. It was done for Maths Horizons, who are the organisation funded by Axiom, as so much is in maths, who are trying to contribute, doing the most work to contribute to the curriculum and assessment review. Because I saw their initial report and shouted at them very loudly that they'd had no understanding of what was going on in the schools facing challenges, and they kind of said, "Yes, we know. Can you write us a report?"
Right.
And
Well,
that's
at the end of the video, there'll be a link as well, so we'll put that up so that if you want it. But thank you
and
so.
do you want one to that? The what is it? The 2006 Legislative and Regulatory
Oh yes,
Reform Act Point 21. Frank, I'll
yeah.
put that one in as
I'll
well.
put that one up as well. All right. Well, thank you very much, Rebecca.
Thanks very much,
Thank you,
Rebecca.
Stan. And
Thank
yeah, we'll be back. I think, is it next week, Stan, or have we got a week off next week? I think we've got a week off next week. So we're into the Easter break. So I'll just double check because I don't want to sort of set people up here. Yeah, so next week is the week off, and we're back then on the in the week of it's the week of the 28th of April is when our next guest is, and it's Brian Lightman, who was the General Secretary of ASCL for many years, who's been a
Yeah.
guest here before. So anyway, until then, thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Stan,
Thanks,
and
Rebecca.
we'll see you all after the Easter break. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.